Remakes aren't exactly a new concept in gaming. Back in the medium Stone Age, the 1980s, home console developers were driven to emulate the dynamic arcade experience in the household. For better or for worse, plenty of arcade classics were remade for current consoles, letting fans play without needing a pocket full of change. These days, such conversions are known as ports, with the main objective being to transfer a near-identical experience from the original platform to another. Considered distinct from remasters, where the same experience is upscaled graphically, and entirely separate from remakes, where the original title is rebuilt from the ground up. The Final Fantasy series has had more than its fair share of ports across platforms over the years, starting all the way back in 1989, when the Famicom title Final Fantasy was re-released on the MSX2. This opened up the path for future titles to receive similar treatment over the years, with former company Squaresoft going so far as to port the acclaimed Final Fantasy IV upwards of 20 times since its original release. Most recently added to the catalogue is the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, which currently has 2 of 3 projected games released. Unlike anything else in Final Fantasy port history, the world of FF7 has been entirely remade, with a brand new combat system and enhanced story to boot, resulting in a gaming experience both familiar and unrecognisable to those who played the original PS1 game. Though the remake project has become a flagship title for Square Enix, for years it was only a dream, being hinted at with additional content being created for the FF7 compilation and a technical demo for the PS3. Its success has led fans to speculate other games in the series might get the remake treatment themselves, with a great deal of us hoping for an FF8 remake. Please Square Enix, give me more of this glorious man. In many ways it makes sense for Final Fantasy IX to be the next title to be upgraded, and here's why I think this is the case. FF9 occupies a unique space in the series as both a nostalgic love letter full of throwbacks and as the last mainline game to feature the active time battle, Final Fantasy's signature battle system. Most FF games make nods to their predecessors, but FF9 goes that step further and acts as more of a wholehearted homage to the first 5 titles, all directed by series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi. Aesthetically, the resemblance is obvious, with a return to a fantastical medieval-style world favoured by earlier titles, and characters represented by traditional job uniforms. Of course, the throwbacks don't stop there. The story itself is full of references, both obvious and obscure, from mirroring FF4's twin moons, to the parable of Joseph and his daughter Nellie lifted from FF2, to the 4 elemental fiends making their first reappearance since the original title. The game carefully balances meta self-references to Squaresoft's earlier work, while building up the legacy of this series to create its own original story. If nothing else, the frequent references to characters and events from other games certainly makes it seem to us as though all of those things might have actually existed in the history of FF9. Though we're satisfied with an entirely original cast, well, except one, it certainly opens up the possibility that an expansion of the narrative could reference more plot points directly from those older titles, especially if Square Enix decides to focus on the in-game history of FF9. Considering the FF7 Remake has gained such success after incorporating previous compilation stories into its new narrative, we can't say more throwbacks would be a mistake. When FF9 was first released in the year 2000, it was to decent success, both at home and worldwide, but only the series' home region had access to the entire franchise that came before. North America had experienced only 2 titles from 1 to 5's roster by that time, and Europe had no access at all. But regardless as to whether you recognise the references or not, FF9 released to international critical acclaim. So why does the title have such universal appeal? Forget the classics for a minute. To understand FF9, it's important to compare it to its immediate predecessors, Final Fantasy VII and VIII, which both released on the same platform in 97 and 99 respectively. Where FF9 didn't stray from the classic battle and job systems, 7 and 8 were far more experimental mechanically. FF7's materia system allows for near full customizability when it comes to who does what, from magic spells to stat increases to additional commands. Anyone can equip anything, though the party's base stats lead them to have an edge in certain areas, and their roles in the story are rigid. Outside the weapon types and limit breaks, none of the cast particularly resemble classic Final Fantasy jobs, something that FF8 also features. 8 also goes a step further with its mechanically identical party. The junction system allows any stored magic to be equipped in place of armor and accessories, including but not limited to the HP pool, and enemy stats increase as you level, disincentivizing character growth but still allowing players full control. Then there's FF9, which foregoes blank slates and instead gives every party member a strict role they cannot deviate from. Weapons and armor teach the characters unique commands, and player control comes in the form of deciding which abilities to equip. While players who enjoy building a party to their specifications might not enjoy the strict battle identities, the roles the characters play within the story feel immediately identifiable, unlike the two prior games. Most apparent in this regard is the struggle Princess Garnet, or Dagger, faces as she goes from being a sheltered princess to a capable young woman unafraid of the world. A natural summoner, she's unable to use her innate abilities until she grows in levels to use them, and later loses the ability to do so when she loses her voice. Whether it's signifying the long road to maturity or showcasing these characters' unwitting flaws, growth is inextricably tied to the roles they play within the story at large. For those new to the series, this accessibility can certainly be a draw, but with the current gaming landscape moving away from turn-based combat and favouring a more active approach, there's room for change here as well. Later titles FF15 and 16 have proven that real-time combat works intuitively, and FF7 Remake allows players to jump between characters in battle without sacrificing the support of fellow party members. We've been spoiled for choice when it comes to sword-wielding heroes, now we want to see what playing a magical flutist or legendary Gormand is like. However, when it comes to Final Fantasy, there's one aspect that stands out over everything else. With the exception of a few titles, the franchise at large is best known for its in-depth storytelling. Rich characters and a grand world propel good versus evil narratives beyond simply saving the world, and the best stories are ones that stick with you. Previous games have focused on global issues like corporate greed and perpetual war, but at its core, one of Final Fantasy IX's main themes is identity. Every member of the cast wrestles with their place in the world, struggling to fit in and not lose their sense of selves when confronted with issues much bigger than them. Take Steiner for example, a dogmatic knight who initially refuses to consider a rough-talking commoner worth listening to, and who later reconsiders his point of view. There's also Freya, a proud knight faced with tragedy after tragedy who not only stays strong in the face of despair, but later joins forces with those who previously wronged her, all the while remaining committed to her own personal aspirations. And sure, we don't live in a world where rats and hippos can talk, but in many ways FF9's world reflects our own even more closely than when it was first released. Despite its fairy tale image, too many locations on Gaia can be deeply upsetting, with the scars of war prominently on display in some cities, to the ugly way people are treated merely because of how they look. It's all too easy to feel alienated and alone, but Final Fantasy IX presents us with a much more positive alternative with every person we travel with. Cheerful Zidane encourages everyone to embrace their own individuality, and in his darkest moments is able to rely on his friends. Young Vivi finds his purpose in travelling the world to act as a lens for his found family. Queenie learns that pushing past the fear of the unknown can lead to greater experiences than staying put. Also, Amaranth is there. Even the main villain Kuja, driven primarily by his desire for power and later radicalized by his own mortality, is allowed something of a redemption when he rescues the party from certain death. Whether or not this makes up for his actions throughout the game is up for debate, but it suggests that no one is purely evil and that there is a chance for anyone to right their own wrongs. A return to Final Fantasy IX couldn't come at a better time. As Zidane himself says, you don't need a reason to help people, and in the face of so much negativity worldwide, it's a message worth remembering. Such an important outlook combined with reimagined gameplay has us hoping that series veterans and newcomers to the franchise alike can come together and eagerly looking forward to a potential remake around the corner. So that concludes the video on why I think an FF9 remake is important. Hope you liked the video, and let us know what you think in the comments below. If you'd like to hear more Final Fantasy discussion, we also have a podcast linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.